It was a bold move for me because I was leaving a very established career path that you have in
Right.
the accounting firm, and I just made a manager, which is a great spot in the career. And you starting to get, they prep you to be a partner one day. But for me, the opportunity presented itself, and I thought, this might be an interesting chapter, and I want to try out a startup.
Welcome back to the Bold Pipe Podcast. I'm Ryan Prindiville. As this podcast series rolls along, we'll be pulling back the curtain on some of the biggest leaders in business and hear some of their stories behind their boldest ventures. It's more than a story, it's a playbook for action. I'm thrilled today to be joined by one of the portfolio finance partners at Andreessen Horowitz, Ivan Makarov. Today we'll be exploring Ivan's career path, how he's helping early stage and unicorn status companies and founders and their leadership teams make bold plays and driving that hyper growth A16Z is known for. And Ivan, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here, Ryan. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Good to see you as well as always. We've done a lot of good things together, and looking forward to having a great conversation today. Maybe before we dive into your background a little bit, maybe can you talk a little bit about just that, give us a taste of what you're working on at A16Z today, and maybe shed a little bit on your outlook for AI, given how closely you're working with all those companies that are on the bleeding edge today.
Yeah. So what I do here is I'm a partner on the operating side. I joined the firm about 18 months ago, and really my role here is one of the three things. Almost every day I'm working on one of the three things, or three things at the same time. One is I help our founders that we invested into post-investment. So we have the picking side of the house that picks investments that we make, and then we have the helping side of the house that then work with founders and their operating teams to help them build better businesses. And essentially what we do here, especially by having a strong operating team made up of a lot of folks like me that have operated in the startup world, maybe former founders or former executives, to sort of improve our batting average as a venture capital firm. And so they get a lot of help in cases of, sometimes I am somebody they can give them an opinion on things, somebody they can advise them on what to do next, somebody they can bounce off ideas from. I can introduce them to an extended network, folks like Carmenino when the project is too large or too technical, or it's an area that I don't know anything about. I maintain extended network of friends. We call them the friends of the firm and partners. And lastly, I've been building out the community as well, because I realized that there's only so much time I have in the day, or other people here at the firm. So a lot of the times they can just, call a friend doesn't just mean call Ivan. It means call another CFO, call another founder, so on and so forth, get opinion. Also, we find, just in general, like to talk about it, and we'll talk about this a lot. What's different about this era is that these are the new generation that's asking questions from multiple people. Typically, if they have a problem they're solving, they'll get 5, 6 different opinions and then pick what they think the best solution is for them. And so oftentimes, like, having a community it helps me, it helps the firm, and it helps all of our portfolio companies. So that's generally what I do here. It's a different flavor of things. I work with companies of all sizes. Sometimes I work with companies that just got their first check, and it's a dropout out of Berkeley AI research lab that had never run the business. They don't even know if they need a business insurance. They don't know if they need a bank account or
Just the
multiple
basics
bank
of running the
accounts.
business. They have a great idea, great product, great go-to-market strategy, but maybe they don't have the backbone of just how to run the business, right?
Exactly. I get a question, what's the D&O insurance? And so, like, it's something that I've dealt with for many years and bought many times and renewed many times, but it's the first for them. All the way to working with late stage companies that are about ready to go public, when we help them with positioning, we help them with business modeling, and so on and so forth. The kind of things you do at the very last minute as you're about to go public. And so different things, and that's really interesting times. I think what your second part of the question was, like, what's happening in AI today. We think, and I've seen multiple versions of that we're
Yep.
in a super cycle right now, that things are really accelerating at a pace that we haven't seen for decades, perhaps. There's a new technology that's emerging that's quickly not just certain people in the business are using, everybody's using AI.
Mhm.
My kids are now using AI. They were not allowed to use AI 6 months ago at schools. Now it's actually in many ways encouraged by the teachers. I think
Embedded into the
there's
classroom as you and I have talked about before, I think.
exactly, exactly, and so it's really fun time because there's a lot of change, technologically, but also in the world, and so it's really interesting to be at that vantage point of where we are today.
One of the threads that we've seen across our interviews here on the pod so far is that pace of change has accelerating at a pace that, yes, maybe there have been these bubbles in the past where we've seen a lot of the new launches and so forth, but the pace that and the acceleration is something that I don't know that we have seen before. And I think your comment just reflects that as well. Maybe before we go into more of those specific examples, I'd love to give people a little bit of background on your business career because you didn't grow up in VC world. You didn't grow you grew up, like you said, operating and having done and made some of these mistakes that the founders that you're working with have done before. Maybe talk to us a little bit about, where did you grow up, if you will, and how did you transition kind of from the the big four mindset into the kind of the startup mindset a little bit.
Yeah, I don't like to think about it as I pivoted multiple times. I think pivot is a very hard word and sometimes negative word. I probably had multiple chapters in my career, and I will have likely other chapters still to come. I feel like I got a lot more energy to go in many years. So, but I started, well, first of all, I'm an immigrant. I think that's kind of common characteristics you see with a lot of immigrants is that they leave their current environment. They're not afraid to make big changes in their lives, and they think they entering a better door. And so I felt like I've had many doors present themselves over time, and I've jumped into them. And so first was coming to the United States. I grew up in Russia, and then came to the United States with no idea in mind what I wanted to do. I actually thought I was going to be a journalist because that was like some area I was really passionate about. Sports, I'm a big sports fan. And I thought it would be fun to be a sports journalist. I'm not good enough to play, but I can be there. But the journalism was going through a rapid change with the internet onset. This is
Right.
before even blogs, but you could already tell it was too early. I mean, it's too late for journalism. So I went into accounting. Accounting seemed like an interesting area because I did have an inclination to be in business, and I had a very accounting 100 class where I took it at the Brigham Young University. It was a very interesting, very entertaining class, believe it or not.
Mhm.
Accounting can be entertaining,
It can be.
and it was taught and from a very interesting angle, but also by a professor who was essentially a comedian who made it very interesting to learn the topics. And as I was learning through that, I took the next class. Was very much tep much deeper technical accounting class that I still enjoyed. And so typical path is that I end up with PwC, and then spend some time with ENY as well. So the first sort of chapter was in the public accounting. I was actually in tax, interestingly enough, international tax. So because I was drawn to technology and I was drawn to rapidly growing companies and also the kind of intellectual challenge of international tax, global planning, M&A, IP structuring, that our Silicon Valley offices were doing. So, and then I realized too is that I'm in Silicon Valley, and I still felt like I wanted to be closer to building.
Right.
And a very long story short is that I knew founders of this company called SmugMug, and who was in one of the early pioneers of photo sharing. They existed way before Instagram or Facebook. Were all about photos, and so they invited me for lunch one day, and that lunch turned into an offer on the spot because they were just at that inflection point of needing a finance person. And even though I was tax person, but they implied that tax person, CPA understands the business, we can give him on other things to do here. And so, and I thought, well, it was a bold move for me because I was leaving a very established career path that you have
Right.
in the accounting firm, and I just made a manager, which is a great spot in the career, and you starting to get they prep you to be a partner one day. But for me, the opportunity presented itself, and I thought, this might be an interesting chapter, and I want to try out a startup. And so the 100 people company, nothing built out. General ledger was not really like had to redo everything that you typically do when you join it for the first time, and it was really fun. And then I spent about 8 years there, and company grew in multiple ways. We got into M&A in the later stages, bought a number of companies, and then I thought, let's do it one more time and somewhere else, take the lessons that I've learned, mistakes, and hopefully the right things, and do it in a different business. So then I jumped to Webflow. Webflow at the time was a Series A company that just raised a sizable round of financing from investors, and also needed the first finance leader. And so they thought I could do the job, and spent an amazing 4 years there. And it was slightly different. It was a venture-backed company, and so came with all of the pluses and minuses of that model, where Smugmug was family owned, and so bootstrap company where we had to live on retained earnings, and then similar space, and so it was really fun time to build and to grow, and learned a lot. And then when I was thinking, what do I want to do next? What might be the next chapter? Is it the third startup, or is it something else? This was about 2 years ago. This opportunity from A16Z presented itself, and they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we think you can maybe build this at scale for our startups." And I thought, why not? I think function like this should exist at every venture firm that has an operating team, because finance is at the center of everything. I had Ben Horowitz once tell me, most of our problems start with not having a head of finance at our companies, at a portfolio company. So I'm a big believer in that, and so I'm helping now to get that in companies and do it better.
That's a pretty pivotal moment. Like you just said, you don't like the word pivotal, but you named a number of pivots or a number of personal inflection points. And we talk, people like you and me talk about inflection points in businesses all the time. But the reality is, you as an individual and all of us face those personal inflection points where we have to make a decision and make that jump and so forth as well. And those personal decisions probably play a big role in how you advise your founders and your finance teams at portfolio companies today, I suspect.
That's a very good point, Ryan. I think I don't know exactly who the author is, but we hear here at the firm, Ben Horowitz, repeated over and over again. You have to disrupt yourself as the firm, as the business,
Right.
all the time, or you'll be disrupted. And I think what you said definitely applies to individual as well. We have to keep disrupting ourselves, or someone else is going to take our job. Someone else is going to get ahead. And so that definitely applies to the career, because like we said, there's a lot of things that are changing right now. You have to reinvent yourself all the time. And sometimes that means doing something else. Other times it just meaning abandoning old beliefs and doing things the new way.
So maybe personal question then, before we transition, what's your favorite part about the role with A16Z today?
I think then my favorite part is that you get to learn on the job every day.
Yeah.
You work with a lot of companies, you meet different business models, different individuals, different founders, you read the investment memos, materials, and but more than anything, in venture capital, you're probably 6 to 12 months ahead of where the world is going, because of the way things are. We also early stage investors,
Right.
so we see some of these companies very early and follow them on the journey. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just felt like in a very advanced, very fast paced MBA, but
Right.
the one they do to get to see every day, and it's actual real case studies, not the Harvard business case studies. So it's been really fun
That's
that way.
kind of what I was thinking you were going to say, because I see you as a problem solver, as somebody who likes to be challenged every day, and it seems like you're getting the MBA a week kind of thing with all of the challenges you're facing every week, and that you get a new question or a new challenge from different portfolio companies, probably every week is my suspicion, maybe every
For
day.
sure. For sure. And I have a notebook where I hear a new word that I haven't heard before, or a new term, or a new abbreviation. We use a lot of
Yeah.
acronyms in business. And you talking to a company in the industry that you haven't really touched, then all of a sudden you have to go and learn very quickly, because they assume you're supposed to know these things. And so it's been a really good way to broaden even just my vocabulary.
It's interesting that we share that in common. It's something that I love too. Is I love getting up every day and knowing I'm going to learn something new today, and it might come from the spot that I least expected it. Somebody, walk by in the office and hear something, or talking to a friend or a colleague or a client on a Zoom, or on a Teams meeting, and you never know what you're going to hear, and you go have to do a little research, say, okay, how do I apply that tomorrow, right? Well, maybe that's a good segue, because I think we both see this all the time, and we have to pivot ourselves and adjust for market perspectives and trends. Let's talk a little bit about, from your perspective at A16Z now, what are some of the biggest trends and maybe those patterns that you're seeing across the leadership teams that you're working with, that you're seeing repeat for those early stage startups today?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this topic because we're doing an offsite later this week, and there's a keynote speak, and a few of us are speaking, and we were talking about this in the offsite because we are again reinventing the way we do things, and even here at the firm, to mold ourselves for this new batch of founders and companies are coming through. And I think there's an underarching, like if I just take the highest level look at it,
Right.
it's the speed. Like the word is speed. Everyone's just running so much faster than they used to run. Companies are being built faster. Companies are also disappearing in the
Yeah.
fastest way possible too.
In good ways and bad
And
ways.
in good ways and bad ways, yeah. But just like you can't take a week or two off and then come back and everything is the same. There's a rapid change. That's probably the biggest trend. I think the biggest thing that we have observed in the last 3 years, or I call it the post ChatGPT era. Once the ChatGPT launched, we all realize, I think something big just happened.
Yep.
And certainly it has, and we've not seen all the implications. I think we're still in the very early days of that new era. The other ones that we're seeing as investors, just looking across our portfolio, companies are built very differently. One of the other, not only we're talking about speed, we're talking about lean. There's a lot of conversation right now. When are we going to see our first startup get to $100 million in annual revenue with one person? I like to think about it. How long can the finance team can be one person? And I think the benchmarks are changing on that too. It used to be that you hire a finance team at about 10 to $20 million in revenue, and then let them build a team. But now we see that scale far farther than that with the new tools. That's the new way of doing things, and just the founders that have the idea that they can build very lean startups that are really compute heavy and people lean.
Right.
And so that's changing. The founders are also different now. We've been observing a lot of them are, the previous wave, when we're talking about, if we're talking about SaaS era, um, 5 years ago, these were all primarily engineers and product folks that were building these
Right.
companies. Now it's primarily scientists, and maybe obviously there's a lot of repeat founders as well that have learned their lessons in the previous era and then now made hard pivot into AI, and then technologists as well. But like working with scientists is very different than working with computer science engineers. They need a lot more data. They ask a lot more questions. They've been smart their whole lives. And so they're continuing to operate that way, and they just think very differently. And so we have to take a more scientific approach to how we advise them, how we work with them. So that's the pattern. And the last thing in my mind that's very different is just the technologies with which we're operating, because the tech stack is changing for finance. It's certainly changed very quickly for engineering, the way they build software. It's
Yep.
changing for everything else, all the other functions, the way salespeople work. Or do you need a salesperson today when their AI can do a lot of the sales? And so, or part of the sales. And so I think, like when you think about how the world we're living in today, which is like, if you just step back and you look around and you see highways, you see cars, we have electricity, we have AC, like all of that was invented 125 years ago. And
Right.
now we just all take for granted.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing now is the emergence of these new wave of technologies where our kids and our grandkids will live in this world that they will take for granted, but they'll live in AI assisted or AI first world. That we're seeing the birth of these technologies, just like which I'm really excited about.
That's interesting. You made that analogy to kind of the highways and the electrical grid and those kind of things, because those are like foundational elements. Like you said, we do take totally for granted today. And I think you're probably right. I think there are foundational elements that will fundamentally change business and maybe people's lives and the way people think about careers and trajectories, to kind of tie back to the earlier part of the conversation, that are foundational today that maybe we haven't all figured out yet. Right? They're things that we don't know, and maybe what people thought the car or the electrical grid or the highway, 100 years ago, there wasn't a vision of what it would be today, and whether that's good or bad is almost irrelevant. It just is. It's the new foundation, right? And now what the foundation that's being created today, it's wild to think about it that in that mindset. And I think that you're right. There's an interesting scenario there that says some of the things that even you and I learned 5 years ago, 8 years ago are totally irrelevant now. Totally irrelevant. But the learnings on how to increase the pace and velocity, you use the word speed. We've been using the word pace and velocity, interchangeably, on getting to market, operating faster, operating leaner is a much more important, concept than anything else almost right now. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
Ryan, you and I are old enough to remember what's it like to not have the internet and not
yes.
have the smartphones. But I tell these tales to my children, and they just cannot believe it. They're like,
Right.
how could you navigate? How could you how did you just send messages to each other? Like, we used to call each other.
Or ride my bike to your house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So this will, I think, will feel very much the same way. Like, how did you use Google search? You used like
Right.
email to communicate information. So it's just very different. I think that it's going to be very different very quickly.
So that's an interesting statement too. So you're working with a lot of founders now, and you kind of made the comment that the mindset of a lot of the founders, because they're coming from different backgrounds now too, is different also. So what are some of the challenges that those founders are facing today that are different? And we talked about pace and or velocity or speed. What are some of the other challenges though that you're seeing that maybe is different coming with that mindset as well?
I think um, some of the challenges that we see is that they'd like to think differently. So and they like to go back to the first principles and say, well, what if there's not a single way of let's take go to market as an example. Do you really need a big sales team to sell your product to enterprises and to Fortune 1000? Do you need a procurement specialist? Do you need MSA? Do you need all of these things, DocuSign? And so they're asking themselves that question. And in some ways they don't, because we've just been doing things the old way for so long. But they're also finding that when you are talking to a Fortune 1000 company, they will still require all of the old things that they've required, because the process of buying software at these companies or new technologies haven't changed. Security haven't changed, as we all worry about security in AI. Regulations are coming left and right now, and that's one of the existential threats to this new era that we're in right now, is that maybe it gets overly regulated and it slows down the pace of innovation. And so there are a lot of these things that they discover that we don't have to do this, then they come to the realization, no, we actually do have to do that. We do need an experienced sales leader. We do need an experienced CFO. We do need an accounting firm that have been there, done that for decades and years, and have worked with other companies. And in one way, in some ways, things are going back to the first principles and the foundational way of doing things. But on the other hand, we're still finding that we can't just completely throw out all of the playbooks, that some of the things are going to stay the same with us. So just like we're all humans, and so I think that's the true way. Like, we compare the era and decades and centuries, but go boiled back to like humans being humans. And so I think that's like the one way. Some of the things we're starting to see now is sort of the maybe the chat. If what we did a year ago was the prelude to what's happening now, we're in chapter one of this new era. We're seeing that no, you can't just rewrite everything.
It's interesting the way you said that too, is that the they're going to first principles, and they're kind of starting fresh and thinking of everything new, and why do we need what was done, kind of de rigueur before. Well, and they're realizing that maybe because part of their growth, part of the clients they may be targeting, segments they may be targeting may actually require them to operate in certain ways as well. And so there's a little bit of that almost clash of cultures that I'm hearing you say that some of the founders and operators are feeling. If they're dealing with other founders and kind of the VC to VC backed world, right? Like the small Series A to Series A kind of provider relationship is one thing, but a Series A, Series B to a enterprise type client relationship might be a different mindset and set of actions they have to go through, or even maturity curve they have to go through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They make their decisions on how we want to differentiate ourselves, right? Like Anthropic wants to be different from OpenAI, and not just the way the model works, but also the way they do sales and who they go after and what's the channel of distribution. But on the other hand, it's still then you have to just continue to iterate and like because the markets are shifting so fast.
So you're working a balancing act with your kind of the leadership teams that you're working with then, right? Is they're building these scalable capabilities and operations and systems, but at the same time, not over engineering too early, keeping lean, keeping fast, keeping the ability to hit the pace. What's the sweet spot? Where what's the conversation you have with that leader about how to make those decisions?
Yeah, that's $100 million question. So,
Right.
or $1 billion valuation question.
Totally.
I think I think what we try to do is mode of operations actually here whenever I meet, especially if it's somebody that I don't know very well and I don't know their business model, is really all about asking, understanding. So we ask a lot of questions. We ask them about, okay, so you tell me here's what the problem is, but tell me what actually led. So we try to peel the onion on that, what led to this problem. So there's a lot of context that
Yep.
we need to get, and it's very much the same way you do your work in consulting. And then the idea, the one that thing that's different though, I think with this set of founders and companies that are now emerging, is that they don't want to do a 6 months long project. They need decision today,
Yeah.
because if they don't make a decision today, then their competition will get far ahead. They can leap
Right.
in 1 week, in 2 weeks. That's how quickly the leaps happen. And so we have to take all of that information. I mean, I like to think about like we have our own uh, artificial or intelligence models in our own brain, and the way what's been interesting, I've been learning how AI thinks and maybe changing the way I think myself, just to take process the information and spit out decisions, even just the way I talk and communicate with my family, and hopefully
For
not like
good and for bad,
AI,
right?
for good and for bad.
Maybe we'll interview your wife next week.
Yeah,
See
so
how that's
please don't.
working out.
So, yeah, she'll give you lots of great insight, but it's a lot of it goes back to the actually normal human relationships. But the the idea is that they need opinions pretty quickly, and
Totally.
that's actually like especially in finance. I have a layer of, um, I call it the layer of abilities as a finance leader. Is that first, you're able to just organize data. Second, you should be able to get insights out of the data. And third is you should have opinions on the insights that you're providing. And I think that's the role that we play, and we bring that to the table to the founders, to the other executive team members. And the most experienced CFOs, the most successful CFOs are able to navigate all of these layers and go down in the weeds to even redo how the data is derived. But at the end of the day, they bring that financial strategy opinion that helps companies move into the next phase. The next phase these days sometimes could just be weeks.
Totally. It's interesting. I like the way you laid that out with the 1, 2, 3. I think it's very salient, and I think it's on us as the team members around those founders to help them prioritize their time, help them focus on those 3 key aspects, help them free themselves up from the mundane to enable their own mind to go to where it needs to be and fast, like you said, versus grinding on the stuff that's not important. I think that's really key. Maybe, we've been talking about this kind of, thriving in the era of AI that we're in now, the kind of the post chat GPT world that you talked about. Are there any big, we're talking about bold plays here. Are there any big bold plays that you've seen a portco or a leader make that you're like, oh, this is particularly, relevant. This is particularly great and that you've seen recently?
Yeah, I spent time and probably we're very stage agnostic, and we also invest into many verticals from bio to financial services like crypto to AI and so on and so forth. We're also very big in deep tech, which are manufacturing companies building for space or building for Department of Defense. And the the shift that's interesting for me, personally, my passion is in finance. I've been very inspired by everything that's happening in the technology for finance for a CFO
Yep.
office. Spending a lot of time with the new ERP systems that are coming to play, connected tools, the FP&A tools that are built with AI first or AI native capabilities, and those platforms are being built to break that data silos that existed in the previous era generation, where the biggest pain was just connecting all the data sources together and hopefully they talk to each other. To where now they do talk to each other, and so now it's about actually making the decisions and you able to chat with your data, able to chat with your reports. So that's been a really fascinating thing for me, because I know it's a very hard space, because we're dealing with numbers and AI is not built for numbers, and so you have to build very differently for finance. AI is built for natural language learning, and so the the founders are building in that space have been inspirational to me, because they are taking on the big giants. They're taking on the Oracles and the SAPs of the world that have set and just been the only thing that people buy, to where now the buying behavior is shifting very quickly. And even the Oracle itself is shifting. There's been a lot of changes in what they're doing in the last quarter and what they are signaling, what the future of the company is. And so as a result, it's really good to see that our space that I care a lot about, where we're talking about CFOs or controllers or CPAs or people at your firm, it's going to be very different how they do their day-to-day job. It's already is different with the emergence of the new platforms and the new capabilities.
I 100% agree with you, and we're seeing it every single day with every client and every conversation we have. Emergence of net new technologies, net new platforms, net new capabilities, net new uh, market entrants, and all of the established market entrants rapidly changing the way they think about serving clients, the way they serve their clients, the way whether it's a professional services firm or a software firm. And I heard the concept the other day as service as a software too. And I thought that was interesting, like reversing the mantra that maybe, you and I spent a lot of time in, the last 5 to 10 years. And now you think about it, oh, that's a very different mindset. And it is something that maybe finance, accounting, operations, the typical back office of a company has to think about is, are they providing services as software internally, and are they with the right partners and tools and platforms that allow them to do that as well? Oh, that was kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. Um, and so that's a good kind of transition here too is, um, at Armin, we talk a lot about this concept recently coming out of our CFO evolution, research about this concept about a platform CFO, that the CFO isn't just a person managing a team anymore doing tasks, that really you're now bringing, it's an emerging kind of standard idea about how you're not just number crunchers, you're not just providing the reporting, that you have to bring that kind of 1 2 3 mindset that you said that you outlined earlier, and bring a different mindset to the role. As you think about the next generation of CFOs, and maybe we're gonna, make what you were when you were on the other side of the fence irrelevant, a few years ago. The next generation of CFOs, what do you think about that a concept about platform CFOs?
Yeah, I have a very similar term that I use that I borrowed from my mentor and used to be my CFO coach, Jim Cook, which is the new CFO is the Chief Architect Officer. I think we lived in an era, and it's still true today, that
Right.
especially in the private companies, CFO is a bit of a chief of everything. So they own a lot of other functions that you don't see a public company CFO own. They often run. We see now the emergence of CFO not just running a G&A function, but also maybe
Right.
running part of the go-to-market, maybe running a marketing, and doing lots of different hybrid things. But But the chief architect, when I look back at it, is like they're designing systems. They are designing, many times CFO is tasked with the AI initiative inside the company, like make sure there's AI in every department, the way we do things. CFO is also control the headcount. I think that's another one we're talking about, like what's changing in my mind. It used to be the decision is, well, I have capital to deploy. I want to grow. Do I deploy it into R&D? Do I deploy it in sales and marketing? Do I
Totally.
deploy it maybe in marketing campaigns or something like that? Was the decision. I think now the decision is, do I actually hire any humans at all? Do I run any marketing campaigns, and do I just spin up more compute and spin up other services and maybe use agents instead of doing things like AI agents we build out for our business? And so that's the decision. And I know it's impacting accounting profession as well, like the way the
100%.
curriculum, the way the hiring is happening. And so finance teams get to design, they can architect that, and they can really drive that decision maker. I think in general, we're still in the same world where, especially for pre-IPO companies, you're looking for an operator. You're looking for somebody that is able to wear many hats, but just really execute on anything. Founders should not be thinking and worrying about giving anything to their finance leader,
Right.
whether it's finance field or not, and just letting them execute. It's back to being the systems thinker, which is like being able to think more broadly, and how does that impact the business? How does that impact the competition? And I think we're still back in the world where it has to be strategic. I think that definition has changed multiple times in the
Yeah.
last
What does
10, 15
strategic mean
years.
has changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think in my mind, my opinion, that the biggest need is still in the financial strategy, which is taking the business and quantifying things, putting metrics in place, measuring things. We're now finally in the era where we're starting to think about gross margins, net income, and unit economics of AI, and all of that. That's kind of been the latest conversation in the last few months. And so, and helping drive improvement in the area, because that's the long term. That's how we turn these businesses that are growing so fast into long term surviving generational companies. Is that finance will play a very key role in that.
I like what you said there, and I'll summarize it back to you. I'm curious because when we talked about the platform CFO, we did talk about very similarly kind of some of the themes about design thinking, about building out how the company's going to operate and be systematic and drive the future of the growth. But what I heard you say is something interesting, and it's related. It's architecting the financial future of the company, meaning really driving out how are we going to be the best financial asset to our founders, our investors, our whoever, and to our clients and to our team members, maybe, and really architecting that financial future through systems, through the processes, through the people, and even through, like you said, go to market and enabling the product team to do what they do best, right? So that's a great definition of the kind of the platform CFO. I appreciate that. That's really helpful. When now, given all that complexity and that pace and so forth, when do founders what's the trigger now to bring in their finance team? Because it is different than it was, I think, even maybe even a year ago. I think our conversation a year or 2 years ago, prior to what's happened in the last 12 months, I think would have been totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 years ago, when I was testing the job market, there weren't hardly any roles for heads of finance, CFOs, and now most of these companies have a finance leader. And now many of them are taking the next step, is actually, okay, we have the finance leader. It helped us for the first 100 million, 200 million revenue. It's time to bring the CFO. I think the certain milestones keep changing. And frankly, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to
I
that
think, yeah,
question,
I
and
think you're right.
never been. It's very nuanced, so it's good to rely on the instincts that the founder may have, and also the board advice on this, that because the boards do see many, many other companies. But I think in general, I actually like to think about it not so much any kind of revenue milestone. I like to think about it on like the vectors of what's the growth pace of the company, where the company going to be a year from now, because oftentimes the searches do take 3 to sometimes 12 months to find the right leader. And what's the operating complexity of the business? Do you have heavy spend? Do you have pressure on your margins? Do you have supply chain? Do you do big purchases and then you don't know whether or not that was a good purchase, so on and so forth. And so, how is outsourcing going? A lot of the times, we're a big fan of outsourcing here and letting our founders run as lean as possible for as long as possible, and tell them,
Absolutely.
please go outsource accounting and finance until you can't anymore. And you realize that you need somebody in the room with you every day. And that's down by hiring an in-house person. And so, basically, when is it the point that the decisions for the business are hard to make without data, without what I was talking about, the insights and the opinions on the data that a really good, solid finance leader brings, and experience? Because again, a lot of these founders, we've seen this before many times over in technology. A lot of these founders are 22, 23-year-olds.
Yeah.
They're extremely smart. They are going to be the future people we write history books about, but they don't have the experience. They don't have something that oftentimes I think CFO is like the number one most important thing is experience. Having made the mistakes, having seen things, and they can bring that into the room and help build those guardrails. I always like to use the analogy of building the train tracks ahead of the train, especially if the train is going too fast, it's going to get off the rails if you don't have the rails.
I love that analogy, and we talk about, you just said it, that founders tend to be pretty young in many cases. But maybe they need an adult in the room. Maybe they need the yin yang, yin to the yang, right? The balance, and saying, hey, let's make sure that we're still here next year and in 2 years, right? Like let's do those things. All right, let's jump into our kind of rapid fire. This is the leadership in 60 seconds, kind of section of our talk. What's the one thing you wish you knew earlier in your career?
I wish somebody would told me that the titles don't matter as much as what you do every day,
Yeah.
and that you can oftentimes ignore the title. You can make your presence count in the room by what you do and what you say, and the action that you take a lot more than the title. I think our generation grew up in the mentality that you have to be of a certain title in order to do certain things. But we're also finding this is another trend, by the way, in AI, the many companies are getting away with titles altogether.
Right.
They say, you're in this department, we're not going to have a title for you. You're just running,
Go
you're
make stuff
operating
happen.
things. Go make stuff happen. And so I think there's always an over-indexing. I also seen a lot of my friends make that mistake where opportunity was presenting itself to work at some of these hottest AI companies, and I know that they are because I see the metrics and I say, but it's not a CFO opportunity. Well, I need a CFO title. I'm going to pass.
Right.
And so, and of course, a year later, they hear how well the company is doing. It's like, shoot, I should have taken that call.
I think that's a great one. What's the one trait every leader must have?
I call it, it's actually two words, but combined: owner operator. So I always tell the finance leaders, or really anybody, any department. I used to tell that to the other department leaders too when I was leading finance at my last startup, is that you have to treat your function like a CEO. And if you do that, that means you have a product. That means you have customers. That means uh, you have reputation that you have to maintain as a leader. And so if when you think about it, that you frame it that way, you have metrics also that you track in order to see, like, am I doing a good job? Things are very differently than in you put your customers first, so on and so forth. Like, I think it's the next level of thinking when you're thinking of what you're doing, whether it's running a department, whether it's as simple as running a financial model. If you're, say, a finance lead in the FP&A department, you still should be thinking about, like a CEO, this is what I do, this is what I own, and be that owner operator.
I love it. Love it. All right, let's keep going. What's one mistake or an easy mistake that leaders often make?
I'd say, especially, personally speaking, it's not trusting the gut.
Yeah.
In finance, we tend to be very much numbers driven, and we like the data. Under pressure, we like even more data to make the decision. That's the typical personality. But we still have gut instincts, which, however you define it, is like we just know inside that we have to move in a different direction, even if the data says this. But you can't rely on numbers only. You have to consider everything, just like this is where I like the analogy of LLMs, the
Mhm.
LLM world we live in right now. You need a lot of other factors to consider as well. And so really got to trust our instincts. And sometimes the best decisions are actually made from the gut rather than by looking at a spreadsheet.
Love it. Who inspires you most today?
It's the founders are building in finance space that are really disrupting the age-old technologies and ERPs, billing, and all of these other parts of the balance sheet and income statement that really inspired by them. I think they're taking on it takes a lot of courage to build in this space. It's a very difficult space, but they're going after it and they're succeeding.
I'm going to comment on that one. I think it's interesting. I agree with you because these founders are taking on a very entrenched traditional space that's been doing things the same way for a very long time. And we've seen a number of kind of evolutions or revolutions in the finance and accounting, and I'll say just operations space, back office operations space. Seen a few evolutions of that, and I think we're on the verge of something very, very big here. And we don't know what it's going to look like 2 years from now, maybe even a year from now as well. And I agree with you. I'm following a lot of these entities closely, and there's a lot of great ideas coming out of this founder group. Last question here. Do you have any favorite leadership books or podcasts that you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I'll mention three things. You didn't ask for, you asked for a favorite. I'll mention three
go
things.
for it. I like it. You got three.
Okay, good. Well, first, obviously, I'll plug in the A16Z podcast. I especially enjoy Ben and Mark show when the new episodes come out, when it's just Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen
Yep.
just rambling
Great.
and just having a deep level conversation on whether it's politics or technology or the trends that they're seeing. I think very, very interesting and fascinating. And I've always
Great
loved listening to them talk, but also a lot of other things where we've been publishing. We're reinventing the way we're doing our podcast right now as well. The other one that I'm a frequent reader and a listener of is CJ Gustafson, that runs a very popular blog called Mostly Metrics, and he has a great CFO podcast that's how I stay fresh about what CFOs are thinking besides my daily job and conversations I'm having, but also love hearing all the guests there discuss their trends. And there's also evolution. If you look at the podcast 2 years ago, it's like, shoot, most of the stuff is not relevant anymore to how we're doing things today.
Yep.
And so love that content. And third, just in general, I'm a big YouTube listener. I spend way more time on YouTube than I do watching TV or reading or social media. So that can be my personal interests, like cycling and photography or whatever it is, my hobbies. But it could also be business. I'm a big fan of studying history. So I like reading biographies and history books, business histories, the special case studies. I remember not too long ago, I went in the sort of the deep end studying the history of BlackBerry. It was really fascinating because that was one of my favorite technology tools for a long time.
Mine
until
too.
it disappeared very rapidly. And so, like, what happened? Why did it not make the pivot with the iPhone coming out? And so, and lastly, when I do listen to podcasts, I do consume a lot of podcasts. It's usually I prefer to listen to the founders when they do a long form conversation. And just to hear how they think and how what's in their heads these days, whether it's the top founders like Sam or Elon or anybody, or the Cursor is the founders who are very bright, or the new one, the one that just got funded, just got their big first Series A, and are seeing product market fit for what they're building and are trying to go to market, and just to hear their journey, very inspiring.
Love it. I totally agree with all those. We'll put some links out there with those in the future as well. And Ivan, I thank you for joining me today here on The Bold Play. It's always a great conversation with you, and I look forward to the next one.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thank you.